Hello everyone and welcome back to the video version of the Tone Mob podcast. Today I am talking to my friend Tye Tyler, also known as Shock the Fox. The dude builds fantastic instruments. He just up and quit his corporate job and started making guitars full time, and I had to get his story, and that's what he's doing here on the podcast. If you're watching here on YouTube and you like videos, that's great, but just know that this has been an audio-only show since about 2015, and there are literally hundreds of episodes available here on YouTube in the Tone Mob podcast playlist, or you can go to Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, and download them there as well. If you like this and you would rather, do some yard work with some headphones on or something like that, that is a good spot to get all of that content. But if you're a video person, well, welcome to the show. And if you really like the show, I would implore you to go over to Patreon, where you can get extra bonus episodes beamed directly to your ears every single week, including one with my dude, Tye, and we get really weird with it. I mean, real weird with it. Northern Lights, aliens, the whole thing. We go there, and it's a lot of fun. But let's get into this episode with my dude, Tye. It's a great one. He's a great dude. He makes cool instruments, and I don't know, let's just get into it. Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have none other than Tye Tyler, Shock the Fox, just rad dude all around. I have been wanting to do this for a long time, so I'm glad we finally made it happen.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. I didn't have any of this technical stuff, whether it be a camera or a microphone, which is kind of critical to these situations, as far as I know.
I'm not going to name any names, but I was talking with a very prominent YouTuber who has done more videos than I can even possibly imagine. And I was like, so here's the setup, here's what works best, and here's what's going to sound the best. And they're like, can I just use my my phone? I'm like, you have millions of subscribers, and you have the stuff. This is not that difficult, but sure, I guess if that's the best you can come up with.
Yeah. I think you can, based on what I know.
Yeah, you can, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I've done it a lot of times. I was just surprised with this particular individual. I'm like, okay, if that's what you want to do, we'll do it.
When we were talking about this first, I was like, man, I don't have this stuff, and you gave me some recommendations, and yeah, I went down to Best Buy, went to the open box section, and came back with everything that I needed, man.
That works too. Now you'll be set up when you do a real podcast with a real podcaster in the future.
I think today's the day, bro. This is the trial run for all this fancy stuff.
Well, dude, I wanted to get you on because we met at NAMM 2023. At hanging out with our friends at Stu Mac at a dinner, and that was my introduction to you and your content and everything that you do. But I still don't fully know your story. I don't, you've hinted at some things in the past where you're like, oh, I came from the corporate world and now I'm doing this, and I'm like, how in the world? Because you also strike me as a guy who kind of comes from a background like I do. So I'm like, how did you get into what do you mean corporate world? What in the world? Tell me the whole story. Let's start from square one.
Really?
Yeah.
The whole story. I might have to make up some stuff along the way here. The whole story. So, came from a small town, Western Pennsylvania, called Oil City.
Oil City. All right.
Oil City. It was then the former home of Quaker State, Pennzoil, and another oil company called Wolf's Head. So it was like the oil capital of the world, and it was in Pennsylvania. Since then, they've all moved to Texas, which makes a lot more sense, right?
Sure, exactly.
But back then, I grew up in this, it was even a small town then, and I grew up outside of the small town. Even back then, my father was a pretty handy dude. We built the fence, we built the deck, we did all that kinds of crap. So I was always around. I was the youngest of three kids, so I always had to be the guy that either held the board and typically held it wrong, or grabbed the nails or the screws and typically did that incorrectly as well. My brother, he was in charge of things that actually had motors and stuff, and my sister just complained. But all that being said, I went to school in Philadelphia. I went to Temple University, went in with an architecture scholarship, and
Whoa.
pissed that away inside of one semester after pissing off the dean. And so I was like, I didn't want my parents to pay for school, so I ended up being able to walk onto the baseball team and got a full ride to play baseball.
Hey, that works.
Yeah, luckily I was athletic enough to pull that off. So after school, just like even then, I mean, this was the early 90s. I was, looking for jobs, whatever. And by the way, while playing in college, playing baseball and doing other jobs to help pay bills, I also went out. I remember, I think it was my sophomore year, I got sick of dragging my drum set around, and I went down to 9th Street Jazz and Music in Philadelphia and traded in my drum set for an 86 Les Paul Custom.
Ooh.
That is, in fact, and it was like that I don't want to call it cherry red, like burgundy red color, but all gold hardware. And it actually had a stock fine-tuned tailpiece, which was really, really rad. Love that guitar. Biggest mistake I ever made is hawking that guitar so that I could pay to go to a buddy's wedding, which he ended up getting divorced. Long story short, that's actually the last guitar that I bartered for in my life.
Wow.
So I've never actually taken money out of my pocket and bought a guitar ever.
Really?
That was it. Yeah. My wife has, she has bought me an acoustic here and there. She bought me a Junker electric at one point, but yeah, that was the last guitar that I actually bartered for, if you will.
That's crazy.
So anyways, to digress, I went into, this is funny. I started working for a cell phone company out of college. It's a long story now that I think about it. And this is back when they were bag phones, really rad bag phones, the ones that looks like you could call in like an airstrike with.
Oh, yeah.
You gotta go like this. And
right.
So
like the Gordon Gecko in Wall Street, the big old,
the gigantic things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What was cool about that time is everyone told me like the only way to really make any money in this is you got to get into sales. And I'm like, God, how do I do that? So I figured it out, finally got into sales. About 6 months after getting into sales, that's when they broke down the sales commissions, where it used to be back then, there was 2 cell phone companies. There was like a Bell Atlantic and there was Cellular One. That was it. Mm-hmm. Those are the only companies that were out there. But the FCC decided this is a monopoly. They opened it up to everyone, like the T-Mobiles and the Verizons and everything that you see today, right? So that all ended, which means sales commissions went from a lot to nothing to like 1% of what they used to be overnight. So I was like, I got to get out of there. So I went to the
1% overnight. That's crazy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it went from $300 for a cell phone activation that I would get a commission on to $3.
That's bananas. That's crazy.
It was pretty nuts. It's funny. I think about like that reminds me of that recent thing you were talking about with how prices have changed and evolved over the year for the guitar industry. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the cell phone
or how they haven't really that much.
Yeah. Pretty crazy. So anyways, I did that for a while. That changed. Then I remember I was looking at whether it be Forbes or something, and they listed out the most highly coveted jobs in the US. And it's something said pharmaceutical sales. I'm like, what the hell is this? I didn't know. Mm-hmm. But I put my application out there, and sure enough, I was lucky enough to land a job. And I did that for many years until eventually I got drugged into a corporate office. When you're good enough at something, they keep, what's the expression? They keep promoting you to your highest level of incompetence.
Right.
So I kept getting these jobs. And before I left, I was running learning and development for a pretty large pharma company, which is pretty cool. Had a team of maybe 70 plus people that I was responsible for, which is nuts looking back now. But I was clean shaven. I had a nice shaved head. I was really buttoned up. But I finally got to a point where I was like, this is it. The whole time during that, when you're in sales, and I'm sure all of us are in sales in some capacity, right? Whether we're selling ourselves or we're selling something, whatever that is. True. I always thought back to and always remembered that feeling, when I think about my dad teaching me some of this woodworking stuff, how much I missed being able to start and finish something. In sales, you're either trying to do something for the first time or you're trying to do it more often. And I remember the exact day when I realized, man, I just want a sense of accomplishment of something. And how I came to that conclusion is my backyard was half the size of my 2-car garage here. It was tiny little backyard that I would go out and I'd cut that thing and I'd cut the line straight as could be. And I'd sit back, and it took me all of, 10, 15 minutes. And I'd bag it all up and rake it all up and everything was perfect. And I could sit there and stare at that little parcel for hours, just mesmerized by this accomplishment. Mm-hmm. And that's when I said, man, I need something more than this. So I started doing the woodworking stuff again, started buying tools, etc. And it was probably 10, 15 years ago when I built my first parts caster or whatever. Mm-hmm. Then I started making some telly bodies. And I was actually even just giving them away. I was having a conversation with someone today that wants to get into building guitars. And I said, I would just tell you, just build 10, 15, 20 telly bodies. Just build them. Keep building them, give them away, do whatever hang them on your wall, turn them into a serving platter. It doesn't matter. Just so that you understand how the tools work. And I did that for a while. Then finally I was like, you know what? I'm going to tackle a neck. That was the thing that I think any guitar builder is scared of. I tackled a neck and I got my first guitar done, and it's still sitting over there. And I often think, man, I should really rebuild that thing. But I'm like, no, it kind of tells the story of that's where it started. Mm-hmm. So fast forward 5 years ago, I was tired of the corporate world. I have twins that are now 13 and my oldest is 15, and they're going to be 14 and 16 this year, which is nuts. And they were young. 5 years ago, they were, they're a lot different than they are now, 10 and 8. And I had realized, even before I live in Chicago now, before here, I lived in Columbus, and I would fly back to New Jersey once a week, be there for a few days, come back home, work from home one of those days. But I traveled the country. Hell, I traveled the world. My company was out of Denmark at the time. But I realized that I saw my kids, if I was home during the week, a couple hours at night, and I'd see them on the weekends. That was it. And I hated it. I stinking hated it, man. Mm-hmm. So I was like, all right, talked to my wife briefly, and I said, I'm walking out. I'm done. I'm done with this. Are we good? And she's like, well, I got a good job. Pressure's on me. So now, when that happened, I started building guitars, and I have spent every moment that I'm not being a husband or a father, and that means dropping kids off at school, picking them up, or making dinner and doing laundry, doing all that stuff, that you got to do. Totally. I've been building guitars. That's all I stink and do. And it's funny. I had this conversation with someone else once. There's this expression of, you're always looking for your 10,000 hours. There's research that says if you get 10,000 hours in doing something, you can consider yourself an expert. It goes back to what is it called? It's a book by Malcolm Gladwell called The Tipping Point. Mm-hmm. And he talks about, he brings up the Beatles in this, where like a lot of, when they had we had the British invasion or whatever, when the Beatles got here, a lot of people realized they already had their 10,000 hours in, man. They were playing clubs in Germany and stuff before they got here.
like around the clock playing clubs in Germany.
Like they had their time in. So when they got here and people saw these guys play, like, holy cow, they're amazing. They're great musicians, all this stuff. But they'd already done that. So I'm always on my quest for 10,000 hours, but I don't want to say where it's different, but I think this is true. Where it's different is building a guitar. You're 10,000. I mean, I haven't spent 10,000 hours doing fret jobs. That's the way that math works. You got to sit there and do fret jobs for 10,000 hours. I've been building guitars, and there's so many tasks. And I mean, whether you have or you haven't, anyone can look at a guitar and say, huh, I mean, that's how to do that. Just imagine just routing out a body for 10,000 hours.
Right.
I mean, that's just cutting the body out. So the point is I'm on this quest of trying to get there, man. And I don't think I'm anywhere close, but and oftentimes, when I sell a guitar and I make a guitar for somebody that's, popular or known, I'm like, man, it's this whole, what's that expression? It's that whole, like, do I belong here? Should I even be? I'll be honest. When you came over, I brought you over to the Halon booth at NAMM, and I said, check this out. I get that feeling like, oh shit. Oh, Blake knows what he's doing here.
Oh, jeez.
Like, no, seriously. And you pick up a guitar that I spent, months on. And I'm like, this guy could pick this thing up and say, this is a turd. But I get that feeling, whether it's you or anyone that pick up one of my instruments, I'm like, what are they thinking? What did they think when they grabbed it? All the things that I think through. What did he think when he grabbed the neck? How's the action? Is it staying in like all these like weird things that you try to prevent or prepare for, and you're like, oh man, here's that moment. Like, honest to God, like you probably didn't even notice because you're looking at this guitar. I was like, all right, let me just look at his reaction. Let me see what he's touching. Let me see what he's doing. It's so weird, dude. But it's that constant sense of, I got to get better at this. I got to keep trying to do it. And I'll say this one last thing. I don't just consider the time, and I think we can all say this in whatever we do. I don't just consider the time that I spend in the workshop as like time building guitars. I mean, I don't know how many times at night it's every night for me, like where I'll go to sleep thinking, all right, what if I do this tomorrow, then I do that, or change this and change this approach? Like I consider that time working in a weird kind of way. You know what I mean? Like that's
absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm logging hours. Like if it's running through my mind, and it happens a lot. I mean, you sit there, you're on the couch, you're watching the show with your wife, and like, all right, let me go check out something on Reverb here. I want to look up this crazy guitar that I heard about, or this crazy builder and let me see if I can find this. That's all work, man. So like the next time I get in there, I'm like, all right, I swear I'm OCD, ADHD. I'm zipping all over the shop. I mean, hell, this morning I'm like, I really got to get this CNC put together that I'm scared of. It's one of those, I'm letting the tension build by avoiding the task. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I'm avoiding the task of completing this CNC that's sitting right over there now complete, and now moves X, Y, and Z. I'm like, man, do I really want to eventually hit the button and make that thing go? Or, I mean, now that it's gotten that far, it's so weird, man. So that's my story. It brings me to here, to talking to you.
But that's not the full. That's not the full story. There's a big component of this that we're missing, because there are a lot of people in this world building guitars, working on things and trying to get better at it. That's a lot of people. Not a lot of people are putting it out there in the same way that you are, and I think that's a big difference maker. So, what made you start doing that?
Okay. When I first really started to dive deep about 5 years ago into this, I realized that there was this, I don't know, no one wanted to show how the sausage was made. It was as though there was this hidden secret in the guitar world. Now, you could find some YouTube channels where people would show stuff, but they never really showed all this stuff. Typically, it was a lot of, no offense to them, a lot of glamorized shots of things. Rarely did you see, here is, you know what you did see? A couple of steps and some highly polished guitars at the end that would sound great demos and the whole thing. But it would really frustrate me, man, that you never saw the little steps, the little things, the things on the router table, cutting an F hole, doing binding. You didn't see that stuff. So for me, I think it came out of my own frustration that you didn't see it. I started saying, if I'm working on something in the shop, I'm going to show it, whatever that is that day. If I don't do anything that day, I'm not going to show it. There might be days where I'm literally in here, and I considered this earlier. If this camera wasn't hooked up to this thing right now, I'd have had my phone in there like this, recording something today, but I didn't want to unplug this camera. I didn't want to screw it up because I literally was wiping down tops today, which I could have done a video of me wiping down all these crazy cool tops and got thousands of views, before the day was over, right? Just me wiping down tops. Because sometimes you forget what's in the old wood library over there. So I just wanted to do a quick little inventory of what I've forgotten that I picked up in the last few months. But yeah, man, I try to show what it is. And what's funny is, and I think people started to hook into the story, because I don't build a lot of guitars, Blake. I build 5 to 10 per year. That's it. But what I've learned is, like, when you think about those little catchy ASMR videos, people like to see a start and a finish. And the way they're doing it now, like in Instagram, is they'll show, it's really funny how they do it. It totally messes with your brain. They'll show the finished product, and then they show some of the steps to get to it. And at the end, you see the finished product. And people will keep watching these reels in a loop, and a loop, and a loop. And those are more views, right? View, because they keep seeing the start, the process, and then the end over and over and over again. I don't know. Like, I think people have really gotten ingrained and in touch with certain builds because I share the whole thing. Like, it starts with hunks of wood, and people get to see, like, I get comments all the time. Love how this one is shaping up. Can't wait to see it finished. So people, there's what is it? What is the term called when people engagement? There it is. Sorry, so I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. People get engaged in the entire build process because they see my decisions along the way. And what's really cool too is oftentimes people will say, "Have you considered this?" Where I want to say, "Yeah, no, I considered it, but this is the way I'm going. Like, this is my story, guys. Let me tell the story. Let's see if you like the story when it's all done, when I get the final chapter." But yeah, I think that's how I've tried to do things different. I see a lot more people doing that now. A lot of builders. Heck, I talked to some builders at NAMM that are well-known builders where, like, they asked me my advice, and I said, "You do a great job of showing finished guitars. Show some of the steps in between." You want to really, if you want to make this, a platform, if you want to generalize it, work for you, you got to tell a story. You just can't keep saying, "Here, just read the back of the book cover." People don't want to just read sometimes people want to read the book. You are not just selling book covers here. But I think that's what I do differently. I try to sell the book and the story as opposed to just the finished product, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Well, and it makes sense to people who are, I very much come at this entire job from a point of, I love guitars and I love music, and I love it so much that I just had to figure out a way to turn it into a job because I'm obsessive like that. And so I'm not an expert at anything. I'm not even that good of a guitar player. I just love it. And I love seeing all the processes behind it. And I remember when we brought some people, when we first got our machines in the shop over there at Stringjoy, and we first got people kind of come in the door. I think it was at a NAMM thing. We had a little after party or something. And seeing the looks on people's faces when they see something as mundane to us as a string being wound. We do thousands of them every single day, right?
Yeah.
But most people have never seen that happen before. Yeah. And they engage with these things every day. They play their guitar every day. They love guitar just as much as I do. And this one little component of it, for those that really care, it does mean something. I would like to see how Halon makes his bridges and stuff. Like, it's probably kind of boring to him. He's like, well, I just tap a hole here and I do, grind this and that. Like, but it's super interesting to those that are, like, not in the trenches, because not part of their, it's this thing that we all love so much, the sum of all the parts, the guitar.
Yeah.
But we don't fully understand everything that goes into it and how many moving pieces there are to actually create the instrument that we bang on and sweat all over.
And it's funny you say that. Like I get the question a lot. It's like, hey, would you like to wind your own pickups? My answer is, and it's very quick, absolutely not. I have no interest because I think about that's an art, dude. Like that's a skill. The people that are really good at it are really good at it. And you and I both know there's good pickups and there's bad pickups. Just like anything, there's good guitars, there's bad guitars. So I work with Josh from Righteous Sound. I know you've had him on before.
I love that dude.
Good dude. Like if I have a pickup, even like when it comes to, it's funny when I'm working with someone, if I was working with you and you said, this is the kind of sound that I want, or you said, I want it to sound like Tony Iommi and at this era, I would give that information to the guy that's going to do that. Like, Josh, this is what Blake wants. Give him that.
Yep.
And that's typically, and what's interesting is when, there's been times when I'd say 90% of the time people know what they want their guitar to sound like. This is my dream guitar. This is a guitar that I've been thinking about for years. These are the woods that I want, and I don't know why I want them. I just do. And I want it to sound like this, and they have good reason for it. Then there's that 10% of the time where someone will say, I just like humbuckers. They don't even know why, but that's cool.
Right.
Because like, all right, I'm going to have a guy make you the sweetest set of humbuckers you ever heard. Because that, as an artist, there's nothing cooler. And I hate calling myself an artist, but I think I am. Is that there's nothing cooler than someone saying, go. Here's the 2 or 3 things that I need. Every other decision is up to you. Boom. I'm gone. You know what I mean? Let me go. And normally when I get that kind of freedom, it's funny. Like, I swear the price goes down, like for the final build. Like if I get decision-making rights, prices get lower. I don't know. As opposed to someone describing this crazy, if I get to make 0 decisions, I'm not really into it all of a sudden and prices go higher. So yeah, it's a movable needle.
I've done that twice. My friend Adam at Satellite Amps inspired me years ago to do that. He talked about it on the podcast. He's like, yeah, I told whoever was building the guitar, I want it with P90s. Other than that, go hog wild. I've done that twice now. I did it with my millimetric baritone, which was actually the first millimetric baritone that he ever made. I said, I want
awesome.
This body shape. I would like it to be a baritone. I kind of like beefier necks. Go for it.
I want it to be 890 at the first fret, 980 at the 12th. Go.
I didn't even get that specific. I was just like, I like 50s Gibson necks. Go for it. And it turned out incredible. He'd made all the choices, and it's probably maybe a little bit easier for me to do that than maybe just average Joe Blow, because I'm constantly posting about things that I'm into. So it's easy to be like, oh, well, he really doesn't like, strats that well, so we won't do a strat type thing. And so he did a great job. And then the other one is, I think you can actually see it there above my head. My B.A. Ferguson Shirley. I did the same thing. I was like, I want this Shirley. Go for it. Surprise me with the rest. And he just, he was like,
that's
all right.
So cool, dude. There's something really, you really get into those builds. It's almost like you're building it for someone, but you're also building it for yourself. And what's funny is whenever I'm given those opportunities, typically at the end of it, I don't want to get rid of it either. Because I made so many cool decisions. Like, man, I really want to keep this one, but this really was for somebody else. That's happened quite a few times, actually.
Well, what I tell people when obviously you have to trust the builder to do that. And unfortunately, I've in this industry, I would love to say that everyone's great, but not everyone is there yet. Let's just put it that way.
It's the same for any industry, dude. But yes, I agree.
But if you find a builder that you're really confident in, that's helpful too. Like that was Florian's first baritone, but I had played his guitars before. Mm-hmm. So, I had an idea. And also you can kind of tell if you know what you're looking for, even in photos, you can kind of tell if somebody knows what they're doing or not based on the finished
absolutely.
product.
Yeah.
So I take that back. I hadn't played his guitars yet because it was still that early in his career, but I could tell by looking at them. And then I did play them while he was still building mine. That's how that worked out. I was trying to
gotcha.
Several years ago.
So you had signed the letter of intent, but yet as that was being developed, you're like, all right, let me just confirm that I made the right decision.
he happened to be at a guitar show that I was at, and I was like, perfect. And I got to give him and talk about fretwork. Wow, that guy can do fretwork. It is unbelievable.
That's why the first thing I mentioned when it comes to 10,000 hours, man, I'm always trying to get better at that. Most of those dudes, well, I shouldn't say most. It's funny. Whenever I talk to other builders that came through like the big shops, it seems like for like the first 5 years of their life, all they were doing is either they weren't even sanding. They were just sitting there putting in frets. I don't even know if they were doing fret jobs yet at that point. Right, I think they were just
pressing them in.
Yeah. I think they're just but there's so many hours of just putting frets in that these dudes know what they're doing. It's funny, man. I think that's like the first step in the process. You're the fret guy. Get in there, fella.
Get in there. Yeah. But what I tell people about if they have a builder they can trust and they really enjoy this person's work, they already know that. I say, please just do that because it's the only time you're going to. What happened here?
Yeah, you froze for a second. You said if you have a builder you could trust.
Yeah, if you have a builder you can trust, or that you do trust, and you give them that freedom, when the guitar gets shipped to you, it's better than if you had spec'd it out or if you'd ordered it exactly like you wanted it. Because it's the only time as an adult you truly get that Christmas morning feeling again. Because you don't really know what's coming. You know something cool is coming, but you don't know exactly what it is. So it truly, until it shows up on your doorstep, you don't really know. And so you're opening the case and it's like, I'm like, I feel like a little kid again because I don't actually know what's in here.
I got to tell you, man, that is the payoff for me. I bet you most builders could probably say this, is that whenever I hate having to ship a guitar out, but that's 99% of the time. I always say, just do me one favor. Just hit record on your phone. I just want to see you opening the thing because I know what that feeling is like opening up something like that you're waiting for and you're excited. Just let me see what it looks like, man. I want to see the look on your face. I want to see, just like when you grabbed that J model that I made for NAMM. That to me is the payoff, dude. Like hearing it, that's a different payoff. But just that first visceral reaction, man, that's it for me. I'm good.
Yeah man,
that's funny. I will say this, it's pretty, I guess I'll sum it up this way. It's a weird business building guitars, and what I mean by that is this: there's this school of there's one way to do it. Right?
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Like this is the way. If that way diverges that far away from the way Leo Fender wanted it done, then it's wrong. There's no black or white. It's wrong. And then there's like the folks, like the really like innovative builders that are trying to, and I don't think they're doing it to show off. Like they're just saying, let me just start first by throwing out all the rules. You know what I mean? So for me, I don't know, maybe I'll get to that point where I just want to throw out all the rules. But I was really lucky in the fact that no one taught me how to do any of this crap. You know what I mean? Like I literally figured it out. Now, maybe it goes back to the fact that for one semester I was an architecture student and that was what my goal was in life, is that I wanted to be an architect. And I'm always thinking of design and the way things fit together. Maybe it's the fact that, a couple of years after that, I was taking engineering classes and understanding how things work. But really, like, I'll give you a couple of for instances. It's I don't know if this is. I can only trust the people to play my guitars. There's this thing with my guitars that people have told me that the notes just ring on forever. They sustain like crazy, whether it be a solid body or one of my semi-hollow bodies or even a hollow body. The notes just go on forever. And oftentimes I'll say, I think it's because, if I had to nail it down to one thing, is I think it's because of the way I do the tenons. Like the way I do my tenons, I don't do it the way, and I'm not saying this to say that the way Gibson did it was wrong. Gibson, if you look at their guitars, the tenon from the neck comes into the body, and then it just goes into the neck pickup, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's as far as it goes. And that's because they could build the body, put it all together, and then cut out that tenon. Well, the way I do it is, I call it a deep sandwich tenon. My tenon goes in underneath the top, and the tenon runs all the way back to the bridge, actually.
Okay.
You could almost say that
it's almost a neck through.
It's almost a neck through. Yeah, exactly. But in my mind, I'm like, this is the structure part of the guitar. Anything back through the bridge or the stop tailpiece, depending on the setup, that's the structure part. If I can get this neck, that's really where the notes are coming from, is this hunk of whatever wood you have. Mm-hmm. If I can get it to go from where the two fingers and make that one piece, almost like a triangle, these fingers back here, these fingers up here, and you in the middle, or the neck in the middle, if I can complete that thing, I bet you it's going to be much more sound, and maybe it's going to sound cooler, but I guess that's probably what it is. No one taught me to do that. Like I wasn't even thinking of, honest to God, I wasn't thinking of a neck through when I did that. I was thinking, how can I make this so that this neck never pops out? Ever.
Okay. Yeah.
Like this neck, and people will say, what if it needs a neck reset? Well, if it does, and I doubt it will, I got to build you a new one.
Right.
It's like, or I got to take the top off. If that needs a neck reset, then I really screwed up and I have to build you a new one. Like I can't imagine why that would ever be the case, but it's a lot harder. It takes me a lot longer to do it because of those little stupid things that I do. But I think that's also why I enjoy it. Like I'll give you another, for instance, I always do, and I'm going to grab one right here. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold, please.
Yes.
Here's a good example. Like I try to do like these stacked heels on the neck. And I didn't ever see that before. Like normally, the thing nowadays, or for the last 5 years, is everything has to be blended and smooth and all that jazz in this area. For me, I was like, man, this is so far up. First of all, that's the 24th fret. If you need more access than what that's giving you, and it feels cool and it looks cool, and it's a part of that artistic representation. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. For me, like, that's why I make some of those decisions. Would it have been easier for me just to jam the neck in there and then sculpt it out? Yep. But I don't want to do that, man. Mm-hmm. Like I enjoy I guess, like, if I get one comment more consistently than any other on anything on Instagram, it's that you're really into the details. And I am, man. Like the details are where I live. Like that's
You put details in where nobody's ever even going to be able to see them.
Well, it's funny you say that. Like I'll often put Easter eggs in there and things like that. That you're right. Like there's things that I do inside of the guitar that Bo Hannum, he does a lot of ukuleles and acoustics. He's a builder. I think he's originally from Australia, if I'm not mistaken. But this dude made a great comment once. He said, the inside of the guitar is only for the luthier's hands anyways. He said, so the owner doesn't, he goes, the owner shouldn't be in those places the owner of the guitar should never be in those places where only a luthier's hands should touch, which I thought was a great expression and a great way of looking at it. And he's right. So I really think that I do those details as as a test for me and also as a way for that owner to know they're in there. All you got to do is go back and look through my Instagram things to say, oh, yeah, that's in there and I'll never be able to see it. No, you're right. You'll never be able to see that. It's in there, though. You know it's in there.
Right.
It's funny. I do that all the time.
It's funny talking about neck reset when people are like, oh, what if you have to do a neck reset? I'm like, okay, I know that neck resets are a thing, obviously. A lot of people make a decent living doing neck resets. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but I am saying that I've got like 20-something guitars and I've been playing for, my entire life almost. And I've never had to have a neck reset done on a single one of them. So,
yeah, oftentimes when I see neck resets, like I'll see it on a 1938 Martin or something. You know what I mean? Where it makes sense. Like I'll give you a great example. I bought a couple years ago. I bought a 1981 Gretch Husk. Now, this was after Chet Atkins had left Gretch. I think the guitar used to be called the Country Gentleman, if I'm not mistaken. Then after he left Gretch, maybe he went to Gibson, not really sure. He took the Country Gentleman name with him when he left Gretch. So it ended up becoming the Southern Belle. So I've got this 1981 Husk. Where is it? It's right up there.
I see it. Yep.
Somewhere up there. So I bought this thing and it has never it's not finished. It basically came out of a factory where you could see where they did the grain fill or sealed up where things were not supposed to be. And it's ugly as hell. And I can't wait. First thing I want to do is I want to pop the fretboard off. Now I'm going to put the little thumbnail inlays back on there, but I want to pop the fretboard off and take the truss rod out because the way Gretch truss rod adjustments, there's a hole in the back of the neck, and that's how you would just an awful design, man. So I'm like, I'm going to redesign this the way that I think it would be more structurally sound and be a better guitar that'll last longer, even though I bet you people don't have to reset those necks. But I'm like, if I'm going to build it and I'm going to build it for me, it's going to be a Gretch, but it's going to be my version of a Gretch. I'll keep the Gretch logo and stuff, and people will be confused when they see it. But sure, why not? I got a 1981 Husk that I can do anything I want with because it's a blank slate. So I'm going to go do something nutty with it. You're
not going to hurt the value on it. It's not worth anything as it sits. So
right. You can't even there's no holes for like a volume or a tone pod in it yet. Even nothing. It's zero.
Wow, that's a cool project. That's a really cool project.
Yeah, and I'm like, all right, what? Obviously, like the first thing I thought, I always wanted a pelum blue guitar. I'm like, all right, do I do it pelum blue? But then I saw yesterday they launched that Dave Grohl Epiphone ES35
all over the internet.
Trini Lopez, and it's pelum blue, and I'm like, all right. Honestly, this morning that's the first. I'm like, I can't do it pelum blue now because now that's going to be the hot thing. All right, do I do like a candy apple root or a candy root beer color? I'm like, I don't know. That's probably going to be the next big thing. I got to find something cool. Maybe I'll just go black and be cool with it. You know what I mean?
You should do pelum blue, but don't do it the blue. Find some examples of when pelum blue fades to the green.
Oh yeah,
make it the green that pelum blue turns into.
And then I can spray like that keyboard cleaner on it and get it all crackly finish. And next thing you know, I got a distressed old one. And
there you go. And it's a vintage guitar, so it works. It all pencils.
This is confusing. I've never seen a Gretch like this, and you never will. Like that's one of those things like where I would love to just start digging into that project, but it just sits up there. It stares down at me. And someday I'll get to it. It's like, I don't know when that day is.
Come on, Tye. Come on, Tye. Fix me up. I'm ready. I'm ready.
I always wanted one, and I couldn't believe I found this thing that was actually a Husk that's a blank slate. So cool. And like it came out of like the Gretch family, which is even awesome.
I'd love to find something like that and send it to somebody like you. Like that'd be such a cool thing.
Just a rad project. I'm so stoked about it.
That's so cool.
Now you got me excited for it.
you meant we were talking about like doing the neck resets and like problems and stuff, and this ties into something you were saying earlier, where some builders will be like, "Hey, Leo Fender didn't do it that way, therefore it's wrong." I'm here to tell you, Leo was undeniably a genius, right?
Yep.
He really, really, really was way ahead of the curve. But let's be honest. He didn't do everything 100% right, because if he did, he would never have put the truss rod adjustment in the heel of the vintage guitars, because that is the wrong place to put it objectively, okay? That is not the place to put. You shouldn't have to take the neck off to do a truss rod adjustment. That is not the proper place to put it. I'm ranting now, but
and it's funny. Like I look at a lot of these guitars that I've always thought were cool. Like you know, I'm probably one of the last people that still dig a really rad old Telly. I still dig like the Gibson Les Pauls in the 80s that weren't as popular as a lot of the other ones, right? Because I had one. And I look at how these things were built. And even like I build like my version of an Explorer at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I of course I even bought like plans from somewhere. I'm like, let me just see how they did this thing. And you realize pretty quickly, like the more you do this, I think it was less about building things. This is going to sound like I'm attacking, but I'm not. I think it was less about building things the way that those builders would love to if they were given free reign at the factory. And I think it was more about building things because of materials that they had, or the size of materials, or the way the machining was set up for you know, reproduction of the same thing over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. There's no reason, and I mentioned it before with the tenon, there's no reason the tenon in those necks should only go that far. There's no reason that Gibson, you had a conversation about the volute at one point.
Yep.
There's no reason that there shouldn't be a volute behind the nut, like to help protect that. If there were a volute behind, there'd be no neck breaks. I believe that in my heart. There wouldn't be neck breaks on these steep angle headstocks and Gibsons.
But you saw even in that video I made, though, and for the listeners, you can go to my Instagram or YouTube. I'm talking about why there's no volutes and
link right up here.
Yeah, there's wherever it is.
There's a link right up here to it. You'll see it.
Yeah. There's no reason for it. But even in that, there were some builders that I very much admire that were disagreeing. They're like, no, we don't need a volute. And I'm just like, technically, obviously, you don't need it because millions of guitars have been produced without it.
Yeah.
And on Fender style things where things are more straight, you obviously don't really need one there either. That doesn't make any sense. But if you want that headstock angle, and there's reasons to want that headstock angle, then you should probably have some reinforcement there. I mean, why not? What's it going to hurt?
Yeah. Like, and I often say, like, to me, there's a lot of real practical reasons to have a volute. But to me, my convincing attribute of the volute is at the end of the show, when you're holding the guitar up like this, like to the crowd, it's the perfect handle to make sure the guitar doesn't slide out of your hand as you're celebrating at the end of the show.
Absolutely.
The volute is perfect for that. And for that moment alone, it deserves to be part of the guitar world, in my
100%. 100%. And I say that, I'm saying all this, I only have one guitar with one. I'm not sitting here like saying it's the end all be all of whether or not I will buy a guitar or not.
Yeah.
But some people get so mad about it. And when Gibson, I remember like reading about when Gibson introduced it to try to prevent the headstock breaks because people were complaining about the headstock breaks. And people were like, that's not how a Gibson's supposed to be made, though. Like, geez, what do you want? Do you want... I found with Gibson in particular, now, admittedly, I have more Gibsons than I have anything else. I like Gibsons. I understand where, sometimes they do things that I don't agree with, yada, yada, yada. Point is, I still love Gibsons.
Yeah.
And Gibson cannot do anything. I found Gibson cannot do anything in this day and age without people whining and complaining about it. It doesn't matter if they release a more affordable line of Les Pauls.
Doesn't matter.
Nope. Got to complain about that. They're not cheap enough. Like, well,
Yeah.
you try to build a guitar in the United States and tell me how you can actually run a business and not lose money at some point, because it's very difficult.
And I've said this before, and we talked about this briefly before we even started, or whenever we talked last. Like this for us, for the majority of small boutique builders, unless you go into a production line of affordable guitars, and when I say production line, I mean you're cranking up a CNC and you're knocking out bodies and you're slapping plain Jane necks in there and you're doing these things. Unless you're able to do that, it's tough to stay afloat, man. Like I have no problem saying this. I say it proudly. I don't run a successful business. I don't.
Right. We talked about that last night. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I run at a deficit at just about all times. Like you look around at the tools that you need and the lumber that you need to buy and the time that you have to spend, like all that, the hardware all that stuff adds up to, at the end of it, you're like, man, I'm giving this guitar away and I'm kind of okay with that because I get to do this stuff that I friggin' love. Mm-hmm. Like in 5 years, I haven't had a bad day coming out here. Haven't had a bad day. Not a lot of people can say that about what they do. So I'm okay with working in a deficit. As long as, the kids are still clothed, fed, somewhat clean, as long as those things are true, and we're warm and or cool in the winter and or summer.
Yeah, you got the basics covered, basically.
If those things are good, then I'm good, man. Like, because a happy me, a dude that's in a good place, is a lot better than that corporate world dude that just it sucked. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There were good moments. There weren't many good days. And that's the difference,
And I think it's important, and this is something I talk about constantly because, the listeners have heard my story a billion times, but I found myself in a situation where I'm like, man, this is exactly what you said that you wanted to do. Why does it suck? Like I'm sitting there going like, what? I worked so hard to get to this point in my career, and I'm finally here, and I'm still mad every single Monday. Like, I'm like,
well, let me ask you. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to flip the script.
Okay.
What part of what you do outside of the tone mob and outside of your shred shed, mm-hmm. and outside of your family, what's that one part of the stuff that you do that you friggin' love and you're most proud of?
I can't really outside of all of that. See, that's tough because my favorite part about what I get to do is what I'm doing right now. This is the thing that I really enjoy.
Is this what you're most proud of outside of the family and that it's what you're doing right now with this stuff?
It's a combination because I wear a lot of hats, and so it's the
Blockbuster hat oftentimes.
Oftentimes it's the Blockbuster hat. Yes, I do love the Blockbuster hat. That's a good question. I'm really proud of this show, and I'm really happy that it's resonated with people in a way that I couldn't have possibly imagined that it would. Yeah. But I am also really proud of what we're doing at Stringjoy as well. It's grown quite a bit, and there are a lot of people who are eating off of that company now. Yeah. Which is a wild thing for me to even imagine. Considering Scott started that with $500 in his attic as a custom string supplier. That's how it started, and now there's 30 people there making stuff. And I'm pretty proud of that company, and some of that's me. It's and my input, but it's mostly Scott. So I'm pretty proud of the team there. They're doing an incredible job, and that's
awesome.
I am genuinely proud to say that I'm a part of it, and I get to kind of shout that from the rooftops. So
it's funny. The reason I asked that is I used to in my previous life, there'd be a lot of companies that would come in and say like, "Hey, we want to work with you," and whenever these companies would come in, and you could probably say the same thing of, being an influencer or content creator, companies will come in and say they want to work with you, right? And I think most of us in any of these spaces, even in our jobs, other companies want to work with whatever your company is. And I used to ask this question, and it was pretty funny. I'd say like, all right, so what services can you provide? And a company that's eager that really wanted to work with you would often say, if they were being honest, what do you need? That's what we can provide, right? Like that's what they would really want to say. Like, well, what do you need? We can do that, whatever that is. And then I'd change it up and I'd say like, okay, great. What's the one thing that you think you do better than everybody else? What's the one thing that you're most proud of that you guys do? Tell me about that thing. Because let's narrow it down here. I already know you say you could do everything. Sounds great. I want to know what you're most proud of, because that's the area I want to work with you in. And I think I still think of that, like when I talk to other companies that approach me that want to work with me on things. And the companies come out, you never knew how many freaking companies were in this guitar space until you're in it every single day. And I'm not even scratching the surface of amplifiers and pedals and all of these and cabling. I'm not even scratching the surface of those ancillary areas. I'm just talking about the stuff in an electric guitar, not even an acoustic guitar. There's a lot of players in that space. And honestly, like I think to myself, like, all right, so what's the one thing? Just tell me about the one thing, because I know you can probably solve a lot of my needs, but I just want to know the one thing that you're most proud of. And I think that's why, like, I've been very choosy. I had mentioned before, like, why I work with Josh from Righteous Sound, why I work with Harris from Halon Guitar Parts. Like, these are dudes that are not unlike your buddy Scott, who with $500 in his attic, starting to wind strings and build a product that he's incredibly proud of. You know what I mean? That you're now a part of. And I want to work with those people that have this really specific honed in speciality, because God, if I can only work with them, that's pretty rad. I feel like I'm doing it the right way, if that makes sense.
It does 100%. Yeah. It's there's just a big difference between people who are excited about what they do and people who are just kind of doing it. There's nothing wrong with you don't have to be just thrilled all the time with nobody's excited about filing TPS reports or whatever. Like that's lame. But in general, if you can be excited about what you're doing, I on the whole, I think that's an important thing. And that's one thing we've had to kind of struggle with a little bit as the company has grown, is like, oh man, we have to be like slightly less of a pirate ship than we have been for for all these years. And so like kind of transforming into, a little bit more process driven and a little more efficient with things.
More TPS reports.
More TPS reports, unfortunately. But then you start seeing why that stuff's important, because without some of that, you got to be careful. There's a balance. I worked for one of the largest corporations on the planet for a while, and it was dumb. Well
said, sir.
The amount of stuff you had to do to just get a freaking bolt sometimes was just absurd. So you don't want to get there, but you start to see like, because you can't have your finger on every nut and bolt in the place at all times at some point, you start to realize why you need some of that stuff in place in order to make sure things start, spinning the right way.
You need controls, my friend.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, look at the time. We're getting close to the end of the main episode here, and I want to get into Patreon and get real weird with it. So we got to have some time for that. But before I do, I got the classic questions I like to wrap this up with, and I also like to give the guests a chance to take the stage. Shout out anybody you want to shout out, plug anything you want to plug, say anything you want to say. The floor is yours right now, good sir.
Right this second?
Right this second.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I if I was to give people a plug, I think I've already done it, and I try to I'm not much of a plug guy. I work with just a few companies. You had mentioned StewMac in the beginning. That's where you and I met. I work with them. I use a lot of their stuff. I think anyone that builds guitars does, whether they want to or not. Like they're going to end up there.
They provide my fidget spinner for this podcast.
I've got one of those. It's in the case right here.
Yep.
Yes.
Every guitar player needs the StewMac screwdriver set. I'm
it's
here
so
to tell
true.
you. Absolutely.
It's the few people that I've worked with. It's excuse me, I'm dying. It's Josh from Righteous Sound. I mentioned him. It's Harris from Halon. I'm dying.
Don't die on me. Oh no, he's going down, folks. Get the H2O. Hydrate.
Harris from Halon. I mean, outside of that, it's like Derek Kimball from Kimball Hardwoods. I don't know if you got a chance to meet him at NAMM, but just a great dude. He finds like the craziest, coolest figured woods. And I think that's really my love for getting into guitars, because I get to try to find the craziest woods that I can find. And he does that for me. And it's the people that I'd say, well, my wife, obviously, but because I couldn't do this without her paying the bills. But I think it's the people that actually own the guitars, not because they bought them, dude. Like, I don't want it to sound like that. It's because people trusted me to build something that they've always dreamt of. It's not, you know this. It's, even if you're getting a cheap guitar, they're not cheap these days, dude. Like, what is that Epiphone Dave Grohl thing? I think it's targeted like $1,500 if I'm not mistaken.
12 or 15, yeah, somewhere in that ballpark. Over a grand. I
mean, that's a lot of money. I don't care. I mean, hell, I bought my first car, a 69 VW Bug, for $200. It was on blocks, for crying out loud. So and prices have gone up on those things. But I don't know. I think the people that have trusted me, and there's quite a few of them out there now, to build them a guitar that they always dreamt of. Like, I think that's pretty cool. That's the stuff that motivates me, like to do those kinds of things. So yeah, that's it. And you know what else? I will throw this in there too. The genuine dudes in this industry, and I think you know who I mean, like a dude like you, like you can tell one from the other. The people, like, I go to NAMM, like I showed up this year at NAMM. I had 3 guitars that were already sold. I dropped off those guitars, and I got to just go around and hang out and meet people. And I'm not much of I'm more of an introvert than anything, but getting to meet some of these people that are like-minded, holy cow. Like, there's a lot of good dudes in the industry, but there's also not. But the good dudes, we know who they are. And that's pretty cool, man. Like, I thank them for doing this, because I think a lot of them are also just trying to keep the lights on and trying to do shit that they love. You know what I mean?
100%.
So
you forgot to tell me something.
I did. So, and it's pretty cool that this is for the Patreon members. I forgot to even mention, because I'm terrible at advertising. I have a Patreon too. And what we do is there's 2 different levels. One level, I think it's $5 a month. We just get on monthly calls. Part of that call is we're designing a guitar, like out of my shapes, picking woods and et cetera, et cetera.
Cool.
And for the $10 members, they actually get, so many tickets for how long they're in for the course of the year, where they get a chance to win that guitar that we design and I'll build throughout the course of the year. So it's my little way of just designing something with the Patreon members. And then if you hang in there and you give a little input, you might actually get a guitar that you dig at the end of it, which I love giving stuff like that away anyway. So it's, it'll be a fun thing. So anyways,
super, super cool.
That's my plug.
I'll make sure and snip that out, and we'll put that into the main episode as well, because that is pretty unique and pretty cool. All right, man. Here we go. Final questions.
Yep.
First one. What is your favorite Boss pedal?
Oh, is the Supra Distortion a Boss pedal? If I'm not mistaken.
Wait, that's a DOD.
Yeah. All right. I want that to be my favorite, because I think I had this conversation with you. Can I make that my favorite?
No, we got to get Boss. Come on, give me something Boss. Anything Boss.
I've got
the Supra Distortion is a lot of fun.
It's the best. It's the best pedal I think it's the first one I bought, and it's still my favorite. Man, is it boring to say that the old Boss tuner that I have is probably my favorite?
It's the number one most Every time, not every time, but it's the most popular answer to that question is the tuner.
Yeah,
And
like I think that
I
was
get
the
it.
first tuner that I had too, and it's old and trusty and reliable. I even have another tuner sitting back here somewhere that I've got the old strobe stomper that I don't think I still think I used the Boss, which is funny.
The
All
Boss is
right,
a
what's the
classic
next
for a
question?
reason. Next question: what is your favorite kind of pizza?
Favorite kind of pizza? Uh, I'm gonna say margarita. It's boring, but like a traditional margarita with like the real basil on there and the big globs of mozzarella. Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's the one that gets me. I mean,
Okay.
I that's one of the ones where I can house a pizza. Yeah,
You're
as
in.
long as you were looking for a flavor, not necessarily a place that produces pizza. If you're not looking for a pizza place, I'd say margarita.
Okay. Well, pizza place. Let's go there too. We can get specific.
Pizza
That's fine.
place.
Mm-hmm.
There's a place in Philadelphia called Frank's Pizza where the slices are as big as your head, and they're amazing. And it's even got like the crust has like a little bit of a cinnamon taste to it, which sounds weird.
Interesting. Hmm.
Sounds weird, but it really makes sense. And if you go right across the street from there, there's this place called Jim Steaks where, and this you can see videos of this online, where you take the slice from Frank's and you go across the street to Jim's and you wrap up the cheesesteak in the slice of pizza.
Oh,
Yeah,
geez.
yeah, and then you house the whole thing. It's great at like 3 a.m.
Yeah,
Just saying.
that sounds great at 3 a.m. Oh man, I can do that. That sounds good.
Yeah, it's not if you're wearing a white shirt, wasn't a good decision. Just saying.
Yeah, you got to come prepared for that. But
Yeah,
then
yeah,
again, at 3 a.m., you may not be wearing a shirt.
you go elbows out and you lean out a little bit. You got to go like that's the kind of thing. If you're at home, you're eating it over the sink. Just saying.
Yeah, I got it. I love that. Well, I do got to ask you one more question, pizza related, because it's been on my mind a lot, and it requires a little bit of context, but I'll try to be quick here. There was a fella here named Jerry in Portland, and he was a Chicago transplant, and he was craving tavern style Chicago pizza, which is like the thin crust cut into squares type of thing. There just really isn't a good example of that here. So he started during lockdown, basically started a speakeasy out of his house where he was making this. You had to get on the waiting list and you had to
Is it a square pizza or round pizza?
It's a round pizza, but square bites because it's like chopped with a knife type of thing.
Yep.
And so you'd go to his house and he would like, here you go, here's your pizza. And eventually he started doing pop-ups in like actual restaurants. And I got to try it a handful of times. It was a big deal. Me and my wife would be like, he's like, okay, he's opening pizzas at 11 a.m. on this day. And we're both on our own devices. Like, all right, here we go. We got to get a pizza. And like, oh, I got one. Yeah, we got one. And then one time we actually got two. We both got one, which was beautiful. But he has not opened his like official tavern yet. So I'm dying for one of those pies. And I'm just curious, is there a classic like Chicago place that these are based on? It's not the big thick,
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. So I've seen it, I've had it, I've eaten it, but like it's funny, like a lot of the Chicago pizza places, yes, they always have the Chicago deep dish, right?
Of course.
Then they have the ones that they'll call it like more of a thin, then they'll cut it like that and it'll be the thin crust that's cut like that, the tavern style or whatever. It's funny when I think of like a pizza that's cut like that, I think more Detroit style, which is in between the thin crust and the thick crust, which is funny. I think more Detroit style pizza. I, for one, am a New York style pizza guy. Like I've
Me
always
too, typically, yeah.
Like that's kind of my sweet spot. Like if I can't fold it over and let the grease drip out of the end of the triangle, just to shake a little bit of that off before I decide to get into it, feel a little healthier about myself. Yeah, I've eaten it. I don't know if there's one place that, I mean, I couldn't recommend one place and would say, this is the place to go get that kind of pizza. It's just like, it's even like the deep dish, man. Like you go to any of those places, you're going to go in, you're going to wait 45 minutes to an hour before the pizza shows up anyways, those deep dishes. And by the time you have to eat one or two pieces, you're full anyways, because you knock back a bunch of fries and everything beforehand. So,
right.
yeah.
And
it's like eating a loaf of bread.
It is. It's a serious endeavor. I will get to Chicago one day, but like that's my wife and I are big fans of what Jerry did. We're like, that pizza is different than anything we've ever had and absolutely incredible. And so I love New York style is normally my go-to, or New York or Italian, like wood fired. I love all that too. But man, that weird little cracker crust and all that. Oh, I'm just getting hungry just thinking about it right now.
Well, you can order a Little Caesars tonight with the square cut, and you're going to be really disappointed, but it'll make you really respect Jerry all that much more.
I actually did that in my desperation like 3 months ago. I was like, I'm just going to I'll just get that. And then maybe it'll kind of scratch. I'm like, no, this just makes me want it more. This didn't work at all.
That's funny. Yeah. It's good to test yourself like that. Just to it's just like one of my favorite things is meatloaf, but I only get it on my birthday because if I could eat meatloaf every week, and I wouldn't like it anymore. So yeah,
that is true. That is true. Sometimes absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yes, it does. Especially when it comes to meatloaf and little square slice Chicago pub style pizzas.
Gotta find some. Well, dude, thank you so much for hanging out. Let's see what kind of shenanigans we can get into on Patreon. Does that work for you?
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. Cool. All right, everybody. For Tye, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones. All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really appreciate you hanging out and liking and commenting and subscribing and doing all of that YouTube-y stuff. If you've made it to this point in the video, I would really, really appreciate hitting that subscribe button if you haven't done that already. And again, if you like audio-only podcasts, those are available here on YouTube or Apple, Spotify, etc. And of course, Patreon if you really, really like the show. $5 a month will get you extra episodes beamed right to your ears every single week. Thank you so much to Tye for hanging out. Make sure you check out his channel and follow him on Instagram and all that good stuff. I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time, and I'll see you on the flip side. Bye-bye.